And hello, everyone, and welcome to Rich Sports Talk. Yes, we have a special guest here today, Kayla Pace, who is a great Jets analyst, but also a huge Jet fan. I'm excited to have her on the show today. And guys, just a reminder, if you want to give our channel a subscribe, please give us a subscribe. If you have any questions for me or Kayla, please put them in the chat, and we will get to them later in the show. Kayla, thank you so much for joining us here today to talk about the New York Jets.
Thanks so much for having me on. This is what I love. So here we go.
I mean, it is a love-hate relationship being a Jet fan, as you well know. It's painful. It's the relationship where you love them, but they don't necessarily love you back. And I think you were great because following you on Twitter on Sunday, giving your feedback from the stadium. And one of the biggest things I wanted to talk about was what was the reaction in MetLife? Because Jet fans were loud earlier in the game. I know the chants for Mike White at one point, but what was the feeling with the Jet fans that you were around at the game, during the game, and then more importantly, after the game?
Yeah, so I was at that game, first game of the year, was super excited to be there. First one that I really got to watch all the way through this year. So I go in with high hopes and we just see a bunch of field goals. And obviously, without Zach Wilson, you already kind of have a little bit of a lower expectation right out the gate. And I think that Jets fans are just frustrated in general that we just haven't gotten to see the sample size of Zach Wilson that you'd like to at this point in his career. I know it's still early, but you want to know if it's the guy, right? And so we're walking into these games knowing we're watching an old Joe Flacco who's not very mobile. And we got a bunch of young players that need to get those reps. And it just felt very much in the stadium like people just wanted to see them try something different. Like at a certain point, I mean, we can see that Flacco doesn't have it that day. So when are you going to bring in somebody else? And I know the Mike White versus the Bengals legend is what it is, and people like to joke about it. And it's not even so much about Mike White as a quarterback, like, oh, we think he has all this potential. No, it's about like put a spark plug in there, make something else happen. And that was the vibe all around. Is like by the time the first half was over, it was just kind of like, all right, so are we going to see something different, or are we watching two more quarters of this? And what we got was the same two quarters replayed, where it's like, okay, another field goal and stalled out drive and a bad penalty, and that's what was going on.
And I think you're a good person to ask this too. Like, was there any feeling, or when you were talking to maybe fans after the game, what was the feeling about this coaching staff? Because seeing the reaction I've seen when I did the live recap Sunday night, seeing the reaction on Twitter, it feels like a lot of the Jet fans have either given up already on this coaching staff, or more importantly, I think the majority is kind of on the fence now, where if it's ugly in Pittsburgh this week and they lose in Pittsburgh and they go 1-3, it just feels like this fan base is almost at that tipping point where they're going to turn on the staff. I would love to hear what you have to think about this coaching staff, because I'm a big Robert Salah fan. I do love the energy he brings to the sideline, but Kayla, I'm seeing some red flags, and I hate to say this, but you watch some of these games, and being at that stadium, you probably feel like this is watching an Adam Gase game all over again. It just feels like new characters, but the same old script with this Jet team.
Yeah, so I think that Jets fans aren't necessarily known for being optimistic in the first place. So they're pretty quick to turn. And there's a long history of reasons why they are, I would think. But the problem I'm seeing from my perspective, and this is not really from having talked personally to a lot of other Jets fans, but I read the comments on Twitter like everyone else. But what I see is a much more talented team and not better results. So when you add those things up, what does it start to lean toward? It starts to lean towards the coaching staff. And I'm not out on them yet by any means. And like again, we still have to see what the team looks like with Zach Wilson. Like it's so hard to talk about this team in a meaningful way when you're watching the backup quarterback. Because like how many backup quarterbacks could really go out there and be the guy? Not many. Like at most, probably two around the league. That's about it. So you watch Joe Flacco and you're like, okay, maybe, but like, why aren't we watching more in-game adjustments around his style of play, even if it's just a not good style of play? Like, why aren't we seeing them run the ball more? Why is the offensive line like not looking like it should. I mean, we have obviously a lot of injuries across the board, but it's just like something is just not clicking. And you can see all the talent out there. There's so much more obvious like flashes to me this season where you're like, oh, this guy could have it. And like a lot of it is from the rookie class. So they're picking good talent. So what's the problem? Why isn't it being strung together? And then you see things like Quinn Williams blowing up on Ulbrich for the rotation and wanting to be in a certain spot. And like, that's not good. Like that right there is the biggest red flag of all to me, regardless. Like you have the players kind of rebelling on the game plan. That's never a good sign because there's talented guys out there.
And guys, if you have any questions for us, please let us know in the comments. We will put them up there. We'll answer your questions. But for me, the biggest red flag with Salah is, yes, I do think Zach's going to improve this team just by being average with the mobility. But really, even with all Flacco's faults, this offense is still 17th in the league with a backup quarterback, which, despite all the issues we've had, is still pretty good. This is the defense where Robert Salah was a defensive guru or was supposed to be a great defensive coach. And they're number 32 in the league again. And it's just frustrating, I think, as a Jet fan, because I'm just sitting there going, okay, last year I can understand. They didn't have talent. They had a ton of injuries. But they basically have the whole team back. They have lots of new additions. They arguably have now, with Sauce Gardner, even through 3 games, arguably one of the top 5 corner duos in the NFL. I would argue with DJ Reed and Sauce Gardner. And yet they still can't get home. It's just incredibly frustrating. And I'd love your thoughts on Salah. Like, is it a big concern that this defense isn't just average? They're horrendous. Like, I went on the record saying I think they have the talent to be a top 10 defense. And I look like an idiot now after 3 games. But it just seems to me like, and you brought up the good point, the adjustments with this coaching staff. But this defense, like, Zach Wilson can help this offense, but how is he going to help? Like, he can't carry the defense. He can't coach. I mean, heck, their Jet fans that probably want DJ Reed being the defensive coach at this point with the way he talked and the way he wants accountability. So, like, what are your thoughts on this defense and what do they have to do differently to try to turn this around?
This is the thing that's always been a problem for the Jets is, and not to pin it on the offense again, but the defense spends too much time on the field. That's always the case. And so you have players that are playing individually really well. Like you have like Sauce and you have DJ Reed. And it's hard for me to like point out these guys that are like objectively playing great. But as the game goes on, they spend way too much time on the field. And those offensive drives that end at the 50 or wherever it is that they're taking the field goal from, that's not helpful. Like you can put points on the board and you can make, and one thing that also stood out to me is that the Jets have only had a lead for 22 seconds of this season. That's crazy. That is crazy. And I don't think that can go fully on the defense. I think that you look at that and you're like, okay, so what is the offense is stalling out and the defense has to play like a ton more snaps than they should be. And so it's like you have to, maybe you're gaining that yardage, sure, but it's like in small bits and pieces. You're not stretching out the drives. You're not wearing out the other team's defense. And then the Jets defense ends up back on the field, exhausted by the end. What do you expect? Like they can only play so many snaps. They're definitely not splitting time evenly. And that's kind of how you get into this blender. As for what the rotations are on the defensive line, I don't even know what to say about it. Because
all you need to say is Nathan Shepard is getting 20-something snaps a game and Bryce Huff is inactive. Why he is inactive when, like, that was the big thing. I went on Twitter. I'm sorry. I just went on a little rant on Twitter before the Jets game when I saw Huff was inactive. I'm like, they better get sacks this week because they're telling me, oh, we got the guys to get after the quarterback this week. But it's just infuriating when I see guys like, look, nothing personally against Nathan Shepard, but Bryce Huff, like, I do think if you put him on the trade market, there'd be a bunch of teams interested in what he can bring as an edge rusher. And personally, you look at his pass rush win rate, he was the best one on the Jets last year, and he brings an element of speed to the edge, which I think they're severely lacking right now.
Yeah, and the Jets do have a tendency to hold on to, and this goes across different regimes in charge, holding on to these draft picks just for the sake of, oh, well, like we got to give him a fair shot. Why? Why is Nathan Shepard out there? I don't get it. If we can already see that he's not going to be impactful, put him on the bench where he belongs.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me. And for those of you who don't know, Kayla, huge Sauce Gardner fan. I thought this was appropriate for Melvin. Time to trash his zone. Sauce needs to follow the number one receiver and Rio the number two. Look, I'm not a opponent of playing more man with this defense because to me, the strength of this defense, ironically, is the corners, unlike last year where it was the Achilles heel. I'm curious to see what you think. Now, it does feel like this defensive line is telling Ulbrich, they're telling Salah, they feel they can get there with four. And after that blow up, they were getting there with better pressure. Do you want to see this week a little bit more aggressive defense with just a little bit more man? Like, I know they don't want to put necessarily Sauce on islands and DJ Reed on island, but could we see them maybe trying to blitz 5 or 6 this week? I could see them trying to bring Quan off the edge, maybe put Whitehead off the coming up the middle with the safety blitz because right now he's been garbage in coverage and tackling. So maybe he might as well try blitzing. That might help.
Yeah, so I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there at the end. Like, we're having some troubles in some very obvious spots, right? And so we know where the strengths are. I personally think at this point, I don't know if this is going to sound a little crazy. I don't know if the Jets need to necessarily go into this thinking like, what is going to win us the game? I know that's the point, but right now we need to find a defensive strategy that works. Like, you got to go
Right.
out there and like try some stuff. And if it doesn't work out the first time around, fine. Like, it is what it is. But you've got a bunch of young guys, like, and we want to see Sauce. Like, what is he capable of? Like, let's put him in these spots and see what we can rely on him to do. And I just think that when you have such obvious weak points on the defense, you need to let these guys that have these capabilities go out there and put them in spots where they can show what they have. So,
Right. And I also think too, you bring up a really good point that with this defense's identity, and this has been my biggest problem with this coaching staff, and maybe you can disagree, but I don't think that the biggest problem is both offense, defense, they don't have an identity. Like even under Adam Gase, you knew what their identity offensively was. And under Greg Williams, you knew that they were going to play man on man, blitz 6 or 7, be exotic. Like this scheme, it's like, okay, the Jets are better at stopping the run this year, but they don't really have a great identity. Are they? I mean, they mix in zone, they mix in man to man, but they don't really have an identity. And when a team is struggling at times like this, great teams, they go back to their identity. And I think that's part of the problem with this Jet team is they don't have an established identity. Like personally, I want to see them run the ball 30, 35 times a game because I think this offensive line's a better run blocking unit and they have 2 explosive backs. Like part of the reason Brees Hall hasn't had an explosive run, he's getting 10 carries a game. He needs to get into a rhythm.
yeah. No, and like, okay, so my first instinct on Brees Hall, like, so just to give some context, before I worked the last 2.5 years in college football. So I worked for CBS Sports and all their college football research. Brees Hall, like it was like Sauce and Brees Hall were my two favorites. Finally, the time where the Jets picked the guys I wanted to see on the team. They clearly have the talent, but when I saw Brees Hall, the Jets, my first thought was offensive rookie of the year. Like I was like, that's awesome. Like I can't wait to watch that. Thinking like the Jets have put resources into this offensive line that, of course, immediately fell apart because why wouldn't it? And then also thinking like, okay, like think about how much better Zach played when they ran the ball more towards the end of last season. So thinking about that, I was like, this is Brees Hall's like big breakout. Like he's going to be offensive rookie of the year. Looking at it now, I'm like, Brees Hall's going to get like 1 or 2 solid touches the way they're playing him right now. And I don't understand why that is. Like they clearly see where the talent is at. So what's going on? Like you're right. There is no identity.
It's kind of a weird thing right now with this Jet team where they've lacked so many skill positions and talented players that, like, for example, last year when everyone was hurt and they were running everything through Braxton Berrios. Now it's like, okay, we have Garrett Wilson, we want to get him the ball, but we also have Elijah Moore, we want to get him the ball. We can't even get Braxton on the field for certain plays. Elijah Moore, I don't think is being utilized correctly, but he's a playmaker. You got Corey Davis, and now you have Carter and Brees Hall in the backup. I think it's one of those things now, too, where the Jets have so many toys they don't know what to do with it. And I think what's even more infuriating is this team spent so many resources on the tight end position. It feels like half the time they forget they have tight ends. It's like, if you're not going to use the tight ends, like, why didn't we use this money in draft capital on other positions? It's just like the identity. They can't figure it out and how to get the ball to their playmakers. I think that adds to the frustration with this team because we see Brees Hall, we're like, I want to see him more involved in the offense. Instead, Joe Flacco throwing the ball 52 times. Like, there was a great stat that at the current rate, the Jets are going to set the passing attempts record. I mean, if you're the Bills or you're the Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen, I could understand, but not the Jets of Joe Flacco, which makes zero sense to me.
No, and like I have to wonder, like, what is it to a degree that like they don't have faith in some of the personnel? Like that's what I'm thinking in my head. They're like, "Oh,
Mm.
well, we can hang our hat on the fact that Joe Flacco is a vet. He's seasoned, blah blah blah, whatever the coach speak is." But like I just like are they worried about the run blocking on the offensive line or like what exactly is it? Because the way it's shaking out doesn't really make logical sense because they're not doing a great job pass blocking either.
No. Well, speaking of that, the Jets addressed that earlier today. If you guys didn't know, the Jets made a couple moves yesterday, bringing in Mike Remmers, the former tackle from the Kansas City Chiefs. Today, Cedric Obwahi, the former first-round pick from the Bengals in 2015. He was on the Texans practice squad. They've signed him. Checked it on Twitter earlier. This is a move that actually Lejay Duzable, who's an insider that I know pretty well, really likes this move. The interesting thing with Remmers, which I'm really surprised at, is he's barely played left tackle, mostly right tackle or guard. And this brings up a great issue and debate that I've been seeing on Jets Twitter. And it's kind of funny because the fan base and the fans want one thing, and it seems like the beat writers are saying another thing, which is Fant's probably not playing this week. So that means Connor McDermott at left tackle, which I think is giving Zach Wilson nightmares. And maybe he might say his knee's not feeling great all of a sudden this week. But like for if you had a choice, what would your offensive line look like for Pittsburgh? Because this is what I personally would do. And I would love to hear your feedback if you agree or disagree. I think left to right, it should be Mitchell at left because he's played left tackle for 2 years in college. He's the most recent left tackle. He's done well. He's probably been the best pass protector on the offensive line. You keep Tomlinson, you keep McGovern, you bring in Nate Herbig at right guard. He's been a caliber starting guard at right guard, and you move AVT to right tackle so you're not screwing up with AVT bouncing between the left and right side. I'd rather have that than see the human turnstile Connor McDermott at left tackle against the Steelers.
Well, I definitely don't want to see Connor McDermott out there. Like that sounds like a much better lineup to me. I do think though the idea of something that I've noticed that the Jets have done over the years, they've brought in a couple of vet guys on like 1-year deals. It's been okay, but a lot of what I've seen is these 4th, 5th, 6th round tackles or linemen that just like are supposed to be band-aids and end up being worse. Like the Chuma Dojas and the Brandon Shells of the world that like they came in and they were supposed to be like, oh yeah, he's got potential, and like just ended up being a non-depth position at that point. I do like that the Jets kind of went more the veteran route, which is funny because I'm looking at the comments on here and it's like, oh, the vets are making way more mistakes than the rookies, and it made me laugh because across the board, really on this team, it's true.
No,
I mean,
Melvin's one of our great followers. He always has great points. He always makes me laugh too. So Melvin, again, thank you for joining us. But yeah, I do agree with you. It is frustrating. Like I think that's the most frustrating thing too. Is like if the rookies were making these mistakes, okay.
yeah,
But when I see Corey, now you actually got to see the Corey Davis thing because at CBS decided to cut out for all of us. So you got to see that live, and everyone else was like, "What the heck happened?" When we finally got back to CBS. But I mean, even Joyner. I mean, Joyner after bad coverage decides I'm going to blow someone up and add another 15 yards. And look, he made a bad play. Again, it was great defense by Sauce on the play, but he made a bad play, already a big play, even worse by saying, let's add another 15 yards.
yeah, yeah, no, and those mistakes are so frustrating to watch. And watching Salah too, like it almost excuse them away. Like, oh, those will go away. Like those would go away if they were young players just learning how to act in this league. That is not changing for someone who's been in the league a ton of years. And like Joyner is the one who was like, "Oh, I was going to retire if I didn't come to the Jets." That's not going away. That's just that's an attitude. Like
Maybe you wish he did retire at this point.
yeah, right. Like there could have been another spot for somebody else who wouldn't have done something like that, or who's not going to blow coverage like that. But yeah, I mean, I do think though, back to the original question of the offensive line, I do think that what your proposed lineup is better than what they got out there.
Hmm.
But I would like that to see them like try to get one of those guys that they've signed in at some point just to see if that helps. Because honestly, like especially if you're going to put Max Mitchell in at left tackle, like
Hmm.
get some as many vets as you can out there to like coach him up and do those kinds of things. Because I mean, former first round pick, like that's a great person to add, at least from a perspective of like expectations and experience.
Right. Well, and it's weird too because I almost feel like this could be a theory because Remmers has played mostly guard and right tackle. I think he's only started 3 games at left tackle in his career. He's only started handful games left tackle, mostly right tackle. Like I see everyone just saying, "Oh, move AVT to left tackle, move AT." I think AVT is doing a great job. I don't want to mess with that right now. And look, it's just one of those situations. I agree with you. Like Dwayne Brown apparently is doing well. The hope is he's coming off the IR after this week. It's kind of just the holdover for week 4. And look, they need Dwayne Brown to be decent because they're paying him $11 million. They need him to be. I'm curious to see how he does at left tackle. Does that also by proxy make Laken Tomlinson play better? Like, is Laken Tomlinson playing bad because the left tackle position has been a turnstile? I think there's a lot to get in there. And I do think people are agreeing with the Brees Hall comment. And look, we are both Brees Hall fans. Like, that's funny. Like, the good news, at least for the Jets, is we thought Brees Hall could be the rookie of the year, and it looks like Garrett Wilson at least might take that crown. So I don't have a problem with that. But it is very interesting with this Jet team right now, where it just feels like it's stuck in neutral. Like it's kind of funny because like I hate doing this, but it is true. Like as fans, we look around the NFL and we see like what's working out. Like we see the Dolphins fire a successful head coach, bring in a new one, they go 3-0. We see the Giants, who I really believe do not have a roster even close to the Jets, and probably even a worse offensive line than the Jets. We saw it last night on Monday Night Football, but still they have an identity. They have a plan. They're not making dumb mistakes. Like they look like a professional buttoned up football team. Where with the Jets, it's just they come out flat. They make mistakes, and it's just silly mistakes. Like it's not last year. Okay, they got beaten because of talent. This year, it shouldn't be that way. They have a more talented football team.
Yeah, no, I think it especially stings too, like watching that Sunday crowd at MetLife for the Jets and looking at the Monday night Giants crowd. That's tough to watch. And it's like, I genuinely believe going into that game, the Giants were going to win it. I mean, Dallas defense played lights out, but I mean, if they had had a lesser day, then I think the Giants would have taken that one. And it's just like, it's crazy to think that just a year ago, we're like Jets fans are laughing at the Giants, like they're so far away. And now all of a sudden, look where we're at. And
Right.
it's not the kind of thing you want to see. Not the kind of thing you want to see.
Right. And I think Jet fans have every right to say, well, how long is it going to take? Like, even the Bears, like I said, Justin Fields should get an award if he survives the season because it was almost malpractice what they did with their coaching staff and the offseason moves. But they're still a 2-1 football team. And I'm looking at them, they're competitive every week. Like that's the thing with Jet fans. I think a lot of outside people think, oh, Jet fans are green, they just want wins. We want competitive games. Like you as a fan, did you want to be sitting in your seat at the final buzzer at MetLife instead of seeing half the fans trying to beat traffic on the Jersey Turnpike halfway through the third quarter? No, you want to see people in the stands. I think that's the most frustrating part is like, we just want a competitive game. Even a Giant fans today can say, look, we played a great game on Monday night. We were embarrassed and we fought until the very end. We had a chance to win the game, one possession game. It was a long shot, but they had the ball. They could have gone the distance of the field and scored a touchdown.
And
Like they had a chance.
the fans had a reason to be excited and engaged. That's the difference.
Yeah. And they have a backup quarterback in my estimation too. Like I think Daniel Jones is a backup quarterback. And I understand Joe Flacco is limited, but still, this is someone that's a veteran. He should know better. He's missing wide open players. And I think the thing that also is a bit frustrating with Salah is I think he's like, I'd love to hear from you because I think he keeps putting his foot in his mouth, unfortunately. And I think that's why Jet fans are upset with the way the whole Mekhi Becton injury was handled, the Zach Wilson injury, the taking receipts comment. And then yesterday, basically saying, oh, it's bad luck. That to me is just someone that I'm looking at. I'm saying, look, if you're saying this in your first year as a head coach in this market, I get it. You're going to slip up. The media's going to be on you. They're going to take a lot of quotes out of context, but this is year 2 and you're just saying like, "Oh, this is bad luck." It just feels like excuses instead of being accountable.
Yeah, no, I mean, it absolutely does sound like that. And one thing about, and this is a little bit separate from like the football side in a way, but it also has to do with like his comments. Like he likes to really hammer home like the culture and the character guys and all this stuff. And then in the off season, they talk about going after Tyreek Hill, and
Mhm.
then they got these guys making stupid penalties that are like issues of like just not keeping it together. And it's like if we're gonna hammer home this character thing, like then stay in line with it, you know? And
Mhm.
like I understand like it happens all over the NFL. People sign these guys with a bad history, whatever it may be. But I'm just saying, like, if that's what you want to hang your hat on, then stick to it. And like if you're gonna sit guys for infractions, like pick. Like
Yeah.
you have to decide. Like, are you doing this based on, oh, like they have to be the most tuned in person at practice and they have to work hard on every snap. Like those are good things to hold people to, but
Mhm.
you either hold people to them or you don't. And
And
so
it's not
now
like
we're
last year too. Like last year you didn't have enough good players. This year it's like they can't even get Bryce Huff on the field. They're not getting Denzel Mims on the field. It just feels like Corey Davis does that mistake. Sit him down on the bench. You
yes.
see like, and that's one of the reasons I think Giant fans are so excited by Brian Dable was he made a statement the first week of the season. When Daniel Jones threw that god awful underthrown pass in the end zone, you saw Dable on the sideline go over and absolutely rip him a new one.
Yep.
Like you see, Joe, same situation in this Jet game last Sunday, first drive of the game. Brees Hall, yeah, he probably should have caught that ball on the sideline, but if Flacco doesn't severely underthrow him, like just leads him a little bit, like Brees Hall's walking in, we're talking about a tied football game.
Yep.
And the other thing too is it just doesn't feel like he's living by that mantra. Like when you heard that mantra, all gas, no brakes, I think a great example was this team was down with 9. They only had 9 points. They kicked that fourth field goal. Okay, I get the analytics. It's technically a 2 possession game down by 15, but there's 16 minutes to go in the ball game. Go for it. Like it's funny. Like he talks all gas, no brakes, but that's what it seems like Detroit has in Campbell. They're all gas, no brakes. Like
Yep.
with Salah, it feels like, okay, gas, brake, brake, brake. Maybe throw in a clutch here too, but it's a lot of braking and not all gas, which I think is also frustrating as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. That it's all, and that's how he gets himself in trouble, is saying all these things and not really following them in practice.
Right. And guess everything's broke. I agree with that. But look, I think a lot can turn around, and I hate using that this is a must-win game in Pittsburgh, but it kind of feels like it is because I just look at the schedule up until the bye. I've said this Jet team needs to be at minimum 3-6 at the bye
Mhm.
because you look at who they have coming up on the schedule. The 2 most winnable games to me are New England at home because Mac Jones likely will be out for that game and the Steeler game. Because the other games, you got the Bills, the Red Hot Dolphins, the Packers, and the Broncos. And look, I know the Packers and Broncos have had their issues, but it's at their buildings. You have a loud stadium in Denver. You have an unbelievable crowd in Green Bay. And right now, I just don't have the confidence, especially with the way this defense is miscommunicating. You don't think a great quarterback like Russell Wilson or Aaron Rodgers is going to take advantage of that. And look, that gives them a couple more weeks to figure out their mistakes. Like it seems like they're starting to figure it out in Denver a little bit. It seems like Aaron Rodgers starting to figure out a little bit too. So I really feel like this is a must-win game because Mitch Trubisky is starting against the Jets. Like I thought the Bengals was the get right game for this pass rush, but if they can't get it right against the Steelers, who are they going to get it right against, especially defensively?
Yeah, no, because you have to capitalize on the other quarterback situations that aren't ideal. And I mean, I don't like if Zach Wilson is coming back this week, then maybe that'll provide some of that spark. But again, it's not like the main issue. I mean, it's a huge part of it, but there's plenty of other things that have to be fixed. So Zach Wilson coming in and playing well is not going to fix the team. And that's like a hard thing, I think, for a lot of people to swallow. It's like, oh, well, when Zach's back, when Zach's back. Like, nope. Like when Zach's back, maybe we'll see some more complete drives, but that's not really going to fix everything. So
I mean,
I agree with you though. Must win. Like if we can't get it together enough against the Steelers,
mhm.
there's not really much hope for the rest of the year.
What's kind of weird, Kayla, too, and I'd love your thoughts on this too, because I am very positive about the Jets. I think anyone that's followed my channel, like I try to be the most upbeat and positive, and look at the bright side. And the one thing I keep coming back to is this: look, as bad as it has been, if you were to tell me that Friday in Philadelphia where Zach went down, that Zach would be back week 4 and the Jets would be 1-2 going into Pittsburgh, I think every single Jet fan would have signed off on that in a heartbeat. So as bad as it has been, they're still in a spot to turn it around, but it does feel like I'm going to give Zach a little bit of leeway this week because there's probably going to be rust because he hasn't played in over a month. But really, if this team just doesn't have a good effort, like, and just lacks, like, I don't even think like it's a must win, but the worst case scenario is they have to be competitive against the Steelers. Like, if they lose by double digits again, like, I just feel like the seat under Salah is going to get red hot because I just think Jet fans, they've had enough and they've seen enough through 20 games to be like, I'm not sure if he's necessarily the guy at this point.
Yeah, well, I mean, at the very least, people are going to be calling for the coordinators. I mean, I think people already are, but I think that if you go into Pittsburgh and suffer another bad loss, something personnel has to change. I don't think it'll be Salah, but I do think that there'll be
Mm-hmm.
people on their way out, and that there should be because at that point, I mean, you can't like Mitch Trubisky is one of those guys where it's like, is he really a starter? I don't know. Like, I don't really think so. So if Zach comes back in, he should be out playing Mitch Trubisky regardless. But it's a tough spot to be in because I mean, if it's a close game, maybe that changes things. But honestly, I really think it does have to be a win. Like if fans are gonna be really dialed in for the rest of the season, like I've seen a comment on here too that's like Detroit and Jacksonville don't look like easy wins, and they're
Yeah,
not.
like they're not. And look, that's the other thing too is like, look, they've brought in new coaches and you feel good about their direction. I think that's the most frustrating thing is it feels like some of these teams are skipping steps in the process and becoming really good football teams where the Jets are supposed to be the Giants, I feel, this year, being the gritty team, having an identity, really surprising people early. But unfortunately, it just feels like the same old mess. And look, I think a lot of the thing you make a great point, which is if this starts to go south, I really be curious about Salah because he is a player's coach, and you can tell he's incredibly loyal to not only the players but his staff. If things start going south, though, will he be able to see, okay, these veterans aren't performing, I need to make a change, or with his coaching staff? That to me is really going to be a big stepping stone because I've been hearing it all week. He should be calling the defensive plays. I don't know how much that will drastically change everything, but if it doesn't get better this week, like Salah has to get involved because the defense is supposed to be his baby. Like I was expecting at the bare minimum, like middle of the pack, like 15, 16, 17 in the league with this defense, especially with the talent now. They shouldn't be 32. They're too good to be the 32nd defense in the league.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that like, that you're loyal to your guys, that's great. Like another great quality, another great pillar for Salah to build off of, like to really support the people around you. But at the end of the day, like your job is your job. And if you don't make a change that makes it better overall, or you don't think that you can, then that's going to be you too. So you can go down with the ship or you can make the change while you still have time.
Yeah, I'm also let's also talk a little bit more positive too, because you're really high on this rookie class. Like, I think that's been the biggest bright spot of this team so far has been this rookie class. You talked about Sauce Gardner. Personally, I think Max Mitchell is the rookie that stood out to me the most because I think he was probably the most overlooked rookie in this class. But what other things have you seen from this rookie class that have really stood out to you? I mean, I know Jeremy Ruckert's a little bit behind everyone, but he's coming off the foot injury. And if the Jets actually played with their tight ends, we actually might see him on the field. But overall, I feel the dividends from last year's draft are already proving to be wise investments.
Yeah. So I think too, like the years leading up to this draft, I mean, it wasn't those picks weren't the high up ones weren't necessarily spent on like the super flashy positions. So like it's very easy to see when you draft a first round receiver that's off, right? Like it's harder to tangibly notice like some of the picks like I mean, maybe not so much left tackle, but you know what I mean. Like the offensive line does not flash and in big plays and highlights in the ways that the wide receivers do or the running backs do. So I think this year, part of the reason why this class looked so great is because those high value picks were spent on those flashy positions. And so you see Garrett Wilson and like for me going into this draft, like I said, Brees Hall and Sauce Gardner were actually my favorite players in the draft, which is so crazy that they both ended up on the Jets. I know I said that, but the Garrett Wilson pick, I think it kind of surprised me. I mean, I was, with Sauce at 4, I'm still riding that high by 10. But I think too, some people asked me before the season started, oh, do I draft Garrett Wilson in fantasy? And in my head, I'm like, I really don't know the answer because I'm still thinking Elijah Moore. I'm like, oh, I know how well he played. Is Garrett Wilson going to get the snaps? Like, I don't know what they're planning on doing with him. And it appears that they didn't really know what they were planning on doing either. But regardless, so I was like, I'm really not sure. I can't speak to Garrett Wilson in that way. And watching, like being able to watch him out there on the field, has been like such a pleasant experience, I feel like, from the Jets fan perspective, because you see these guys that are like, oh, they got potential. Like, no, this one has it. And like
Oh yeah.
it's really cool to finally see somebody like a rookie player out there that you're like, I can buy that jersey and know they're going to be in the league.
Well, it is funny because a lot of guys in the chat, like I'm a huge Joe Douglas fan, and I understand a lot of people are frustrated with some of the free agent signings. And look, the free agent classes really to this point have not been great, but I will say he's done an unbelievable job drafting, especially the last 2 drafts. And even in the 4th round, you're seeing guys like Michael Clemens make an impact. It's funny because after watching the tape the last 2 weeks, I want to see Jermaine Johnson and Michael Clemens more. They just fly up the field. They're faster players. They play hard every snap. And it's frustrating because I see guys like John Franklin Myers, who's a good player, but just not getting it done this year. And if anything, is hurting the Jets more with dumb penalties. And I'm seeing guys like Lawson. I get he's had the half a sack, but still, it's just one of those things too where I want to see some of these younger rookies get a chance because I mean, the Jets invested a 1st-round pick in Jermaine Johnson. Like, I don't want to see him in a rotational role. I want to see him in a full role, especially because he might not be a great passer. So this is my thing when I said when he came out. I love Jermaine Johnson, but I said, look, if you're expecting to be a 14, 15 sack guy, you're going to be disappointed. He's going to be a great 3-down defensive end. And really what he brings to this defense is his run defense. He was the best run defensive end in the entire draft, I felt, last year, and the Jets got him. And I think it's showing when he's on the rushing downs, he's playing big dividends. And I understand he's limited with his pass rush tree, but I want to see him get more playing time. Like especially it feels like they didn't use that 25th pick on a lineman, which I think a lot of Jet fans in retrospect would have liked better now. But I want to see him play more. I see some good flashes from the kid, and I think he can be a good defensive end, especially by the end of the season.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think like a lot of this comes back to that weird rotational system on defense.
Oh my
I
God.
just don't understand it. I don't. And oh, I mean, it's the fact that and I know I said this already, but it's the fact the players are so like heated about it that's making me even more frustrated because it's like it's not like this is something that they want to be doing either.
But I think you're a great person to ask this because for those of you who don't know, Kayla, she works for the Connecticut Sun, does an unbelievable job, and has had a busy summer with the team going all the way to the WNBA Finals. But I compared it to this the other day. I get the idea of the rotations to keep these guys fresh, and I get that idea. But I also feel it's kind of, and I relate this to basketball. I think when you're doing this to the extent that they're doing, where they're getting guys in and out of the game so much that they don't get into a rhythm, the ebb and flow of the game, and they're not getting comfortable, like seeing the tendencies of like the tackle, like what's their first step? Are they cheating in? Are they cheating out? Like because they're constantly coming off the field, they're not getting to rhythm. I equated to basketball. It'd be like someone trying to get in a rhythm shooting and they hit 2 threes, and then all of a sudden their coach takes them out for like 5 minutes. It doesn't make sense. Like they're just starting to get into that rhythm. So for you, do you think that's part of the problem with this defense? Like they just can't get in a rhythm because they're being substituted so much?
Yeah, I think also too, part of the issue is that the pace of football is pretty slow. Like you run like only a certain number of plays. So if you only have a shot at like 3 plays in a row, you have not seen everything that they're bringing to the table. You don't have a feel for where you're at yet. And then you get pulled and when do you go back in? Like it's a lot. And like, you can't guarantee when you're going to get on the field again because of the nature of the game. So it's like, yeah, if you're talking basketball, like you track lineups and you rotate, but like there's always got to be those like five people on the floor. And in football, like the defense might not get back out there for a while, or they're just going to keep going and going and going. And it's a blender. So it's like, then the offense is like sitting there waiting for their turn. So it's like, if you're doing this defensive rotation, yeah, you're not getting a good feel for what's in front of you at any point because you're being slid in and out. And also too, like, aren't the best players on the field? Like,
Exactly.
in general, like, yeah, everyone needs a break, but like that's what offense is for. So I'm not really understanding like the whole idea behind it. And like, it's one thing if you want to get a sample size of like, oh, like these players play best together, but like, you're trying to win a football game. Like, the goal is to stop the other team. Like, you can play these rotations together in practice if you want.
Right. Quinnen Williams played 67% of the snaps. Nathan Shepard played 25% of the snap. Those ratios are terrible. And I think the most infuriating thing is it's like the Jets you see have some good players and they're not on the field. And like, here's a fun game. Kayla, do you know who played the most snaps defensively for the Jets on Sunday?
I don't know the answer.
This will make your head explode. It was Joyner.
What?
It was Joyner. He played the most snap, more than Sauce, more than DJ Reed, more than Whitehead, more than even CJ Mosley. Like, Joyner played the most snaps, which is inferior. And let's put it this way: Joyner's played so bad,
Yeah.
he's made Jet fans miss Ashton Davis. Like, people like on this channel, every time I would even mention Ashton Davis, they'd come at me with like pitchforks, like, how dare you say his name? Like, the safety that shall not be named. And now all of a sudden, he's made more impacted one play this season than Joyner has. And look, I'm at the point I'd rather see Davis out there. I'd rather see what he has, because at least he has a ceiling above him, where I don't think Joyner just has a basement below him. So I'd rather see him. And it goes back to like the head scratching moves they made. Like, I will never understand why Jason Pinnock was cut from this team when all I heard all camp was, we think he could be a future starting safety for our team. And now he's on the Giants and making an impact from that. That just infuriates me.
Yeah, no, I don't understand how they pick where the loyalties lie. It's not seeming like a logical process. And also too, like, if you're gonna rotate out really solid defensive line players, but then keep Joyner in, like,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what are we doing here?
Yeah, you basically bear off just putting like a stick with a jersey back there, because at least it won't cause any penalties in the secondary. I mean, it's just been infuriating. And one interesting thing too, like, I would love your thoughts on this too, because I saw some mumblings, because Connor Hughes works for SNY, covers both the Jets and the Giants, put out an interesting tweet today about a certain Jet. We know Denzel Mims isn't playing, and Shepard got injured on the atrocious MetLife turf, which again should be banned and should be replaced with grass. But I digress, and that would be a whole episode we could go down regardless. But would you entertain the idea of trying to trade Denzel Mims to the Giants right now? Because look, if he's not going to play, and in some ways, I'd rather see Denzel Mims play over Corey Davis at this point. But if he's not going to play, I'd rather try to get something from the Giants. Heck, I might even entertain trying to get Jason Pinnock back for Denzel Mims at this point, because of how bad the safety position's been.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think it would kind of depend on what we get back. But at this point, it's like, yeah, I don't understand why keep a guy that might have some potential that you could get something back from just sitting on the bench. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, I don't understand it. If you want to trade him to the Giants,
Right.
Sure, send us back something decent.
Yeah, Lejay Doozable agrees with us. Literally tweeted this 30 minutes ago. Mr. Mara and Woody need to get together this offseason and take the field turf out of MetLife and replace it with grass. Thank you, Lejay. You're absolutely right. But the other thing too is, like, we mentioned it earlier in this show. Like, I feel like if you're not going to play a guy like Bryce Huff, for example, like, even if you get like a mid or late draft pick for him, it could help with this team's future. Like, I don't get, like, if you're not going to play Huff, trade him and try to get something, get a piece. Like, it infuriates me, because personally, I love Bryce Huff. I think Bryce Huff is the most underrated player on this Jet team, but if we're not going to use these guys, you might as well get something for them before they just walk in free agency.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true. I mean, I don't know, what are they saving them for? That's what I wanna know at this point. Because are we talking about, like, potential injury backups? Like, what is the thing that's keeping them on this squad? Because right now, if it's 0 playing time, really not much of an impact, like, are they making that much of a difference in practice? I really don't think so.
No, and again, like it's just infuriating because like we were talking about, like you're a big Bryce Huff fan too. It's like the first two games, okay, I get it. They're gonna run the ball down the throat. But last week, I'm like, Bryce Huff's not playing and we're not getting a pass rush. Like it just doesn't make sense. And I'm curious to see what Huff's role is going to be because Vinny Curry comes off the IR. It feels like the Jets staff loves Vinny Curry and he's probably going to take someone's roster spot. So I just don't get it. Like I understand they gave guaranteed money to Martin, but I'd rather see Huff over Martin at this point. I think Huff has proven more than Martin.
Yeah, and then also my heart goes out to Carl Lawson
Oh,
because God, that could not have had, like, a sadder, like, trail of events for someone joining the Jets.
yeah. I mean, it is frustrating. Like, I know people get on Corey Davis, but at least Corey Davis is going to give you somewhat decent production, and the contract they gave him wasn't bad. The problem with Lawson is I just feel like there was so much expectation for him where basically the Jets hyped him up that he was going to be the difference maker last year. Then he gets hurt last year and the defense falls apart. And then coming into this year, okay, it's going to be limited early, but we still expect him to be this great, impactful pass rusher. And unfortunately, he just isn't the same guy. And it's the same thing in Cincy. We see the pressures, and that's another thing about this Jet defense. They're getting pressure. They just can't finish the play. They can't wrap up. And the bad tackling. I mean, Jesus, if we made a drinking game after all the bad tackling, we'd be dead after the first like 7 minutes of the first quarter. I mean, that's how many bad tackles there were on Sunday.
Yeah, that kind of stuff is just hard to watch. It's the basics, and it's like, why can't the basic things be done well?
Yeah, I don't get it. And I'm just looking forward to this week. Like they have to win. I'm curious to see what roster decisions they make and the offensive line. Like I really am curious because right now in this league, you win with your trench play, and the Jets have major questions in both. Like, can the defensive line live up to its potential? And can this offensive line be patched enough together to give Zach Wilson a chance? And I think the other infuriating thing about this offensive line is the Jets have invested the most money and draft capital of any team in the defensive line. When you think about it, Jermaine Johnson's a first round pick, Solomon Thomas, a former first round pick. You got Quinn, who was the number 3 over pick in the draft. And I'm trying to remember, but I don't think Lawson was a first round pick, but I'm pretty sure it was a second or third round pick. I'll have to look that up. But, when you invest everything in this defensive line and Robert Saleh says this is his baby and this is the defensive line that's going to wreak havoc and it's not getting home, I just think it's incredibly frustrating as a fan because it's like this is supposed to be good, but our corners are great, but our defensive line's terrible. It makes no sense.
Yeah, and, like, there's no reason for them to be terrible because I genuinely believe that all of the talent is right there. Like, I don't think they missed on any talent at all. I think it's all about how it's being executed and being put into play. And that's the most frustrating part is, like, when you have all of those unbelievably talented guys just standing there ready to make it happen, and the way they're being deployed is not doing it.
And let's end this on a high note because I know you love talking about the rookies. I know you're a big Sauce Gardner fan and a big Garrett Wilson fan. So I got to put you on the spot. At the end of this season, who do you think will be the better player for the New York Jets? I think Garrett Wilson will have a bigger impact, but I think Sauce is going to be something really special. I mean, we're already seeing the Jets putting him on. Mark Andrews, arguably the best tight end in football. Andrews did barely any damage against the Jets. And then last week against the Patriots, he had like 160 yards, 2 touchdowns. Like they couldn't stop him. And just seeing what he did against Jamar Chase, getting even in Jamar Chase's head, like I think he's going to be something really special. Not taking anything away from Garrett Wilson. I think they're both going to be amazing. But I just feel like Sauce, like when we're going to look in like a year or two on the short list of great corners in this league, and he's going to be on that list.
Absolutely agree with that. I think that Garrett Wilson, by the nature of offense, is going to post much more flashy games. I think like there'll be a handful of ones that like people really remember and like he's going to be talked about league wide. But I do think that if you're going to look at comprehensive season, you're going to see Sauce as the true the true standout.
Yeah, but again, thank you so much for joining us here today, Kayla. You can follow her on the Play Like a Jet podcast. She's on that. And again, you said your first episode's coming up this week. So why don't you let my followers know where they can find you, find your great content? Because again, Kayla does a lot of great Jets content and really great live tweets during the game too. Like pretty damn funny. Like she's not going to sugarcoat it, guys. She's not going to give you the fluff pieces like some people will. Like she will call it as she sees it, which is, I think, fantastic.
Oh, thank you. Well, yeah. So my personal Twitter account is at KP_on_TV. And yes, that is where you will find all of my live tweets. Pretty sure that those live tweets like got me my current job in social media. People love them. So
Hey, if it works, it works. Guys, thanks so much for joining us here on Rich Sports Talk. Hopefully we can have Kayla back at a later date. You guys, as always, were amazing. Thank you for all the great comments and questions. Love you guys. You guys help make this channel. If you're new to the channel and looking for more great Jets content, let your friends know. I always say this is great Jets therapy, and unlike therapy, we're a lot cheaper. We don't cost money. So come to Jets Therapy here on Rich Sports Talk. Again, Kayla, thank you so much for joining us here today. And hopefully the Jets will walk out at 2-2 when they play the Steelers this Sunday.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers, toes, everything crossed. Thank you so much, Kayla.
Thank you.